Part 1: The Sound from the Water. I didn't believe in cursed places before this happened. Now I can't even hear the sound of water at night without feeling like something is watching me from the dark. And the worst part, I don't think it ever stopped watching. It started 3 months ago, the night I moved into that house. The place sat at the end of a narrow dirt road, surrounded by thick woods and an old lake about 100 yards behind the property. When the realtor showed it to me during the day, it looked peaceful, quiet, too cheap. But I needed somewhere to stay after my divorce. Somewhere far away from the city and the noise and the memories. So I took it. The first night was normal. Too normal. The silence out there was different from the city. In the city, silence is never really silence. There are always cars, people, sirens somewhere in the distance. Here, nothing. Just wind moving through trees. And the lake. I couldn't see the water from my bedroom window, but I could hear it. Small waves tapping against the rocks. Low, rhythmic, almost like breathing. I remember staring at the ceiling that night thinking it was strangely calming. Until midnight. That's when I heard the first sound. Knock. 3 slow taps. First I thought it was coming from the front door. Checked the time. 12:17 a.m. No one should have been out there. The nearest neighbor was half a mile down the road. I sat up in bed listening. Nothing. Just the wind. I told myself it was probably a branch hitting the house. I laid back down. 5 minutes later I heard it again. But this time, it wasn't at the door. It was outside my bedroom window. 3 slow taps. My stomach tightened. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. There was nothing outside that window except open air and the dark tree line beyond it. I sat there frozen, staring toward the curtains, waiting. Another knock came, but softer, almost like someone dragging their fingers across the glass. My throat felt dry. "Hello," called out. The words sounded small in the empty room. No answer. The sound stopped. For a few minutes I just sat there, trying to convince myself it was something normal. A loose branch. Maybe an animal climbing the wall. Eventually my exhaustion won. Fell asleep. And I wish I hadn't. Because the next morning, I saw something that made no sense. There were wet handprints on the outside of my window. 5 long fingerprints. Pressed against the glass. Like someone had been standing there, looking inside. But there was no ladder. No balcony. Nothing someone could have climbed. And the prints. They were dripping water. As if whoever touched the window had just climbed out of the lake. The lake sat behind the house, surrounded by tall reeds and black water that looked almost oily under the sunlight. When I walked down there later that morning, the place felt different from the rest of the property. Colder. The air smelled damp, like rotting leaves and something metallic. The water itself barely moved. Just tiny ripples spreading across the surface. I stood there staring at it, remembering the wet prints on the window. A thought crossed my mind that I immediately pushed away. Someone came from the lake. That was impossible. The shore was muddy, and there were no footprints leading away from the water. Only smooth mud. Still, something about the place made me uncomfortable. Like I was standing somewhere I shouldn't be. So I went back to the house. I told myself it was nothing. That night proved me wrong. The second night started quietly again. I made dinner, watched a movie, and tried not to think about the handprints. By midnight I was in bed. The lake was louder tonight. The wind had picked up, pushing waves harder against the rocks. Left. I pulled the blanket over my shoulder and tried to sleep. Then I heard footsteps. Slow footsteps moving across the gravel behind the house. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I sat up instantly. My heart began pounding. Someone was walking toward the lake. I got out of bed and slowly pulled the curtain aside. At first I didn't see anything. Just darkness. Then a shape moved near the water. A tall figure standing near the edge of the lake. Perfectly still. The moonlight barely touched it, but I could see enough to know one thing. The figure was staring at the house. My window froze. Every instinct in my body told me to close the curtain. But I couldn't move. The figure slowly tilted its head, like it had noticed me watching. Then something even worse happened. It stepped into the lake. Without hesitation. Without a splash. Just one slow step forward into the water. Then another. The water reached its knees. Then its waist. Then its chest. And the whole time it never stopped facing the house. Facing me. The moonlight shifted slightly across the surface. For a split second I saw the figure clearly. The skin looked pale. Almost gray. Like something that hadn't seen sunlight in years. Then it sank beneath the surface. The lake became still again. I stood there shaking, staring at the water for several minutes. Nothing moved. Eventually I forced myself back into bed. But sleep never came. Because around 3 a.m. I heard the knocking again. This time on the bedroom door. 3 slow taps. And a voice. Whispering. Right on the other side of the door. Let me in. The next morning I barely waited for the sun to rise before driving into town. I needed to talk to someone. Anyone. That's when I met the neighbor. His name was Walter. An older man who ran the small convenience store at the edge of town. When I told him where I lived, something in his expression changed. You moved into the Carter place, he asked. He nodded. Walter slowly leaned against the counter. Then he asked something that made my stomach drop. You hear the water yet? My mouth felt dry. What do you mean? He studied my face carefully. Then he sighed. People don't stay in that house long. Why? Walter didn't answer right away. Instead he asked another question. You ever notice how quiet the lake gets at night? I nodded slowly. That's because the lake is listening. I forced a nervous laugh. You're joking, right? Walter didn't smile. Instead he said something I'll never forget. 3 people drowned in that lake. My chest tightened. When? Last 10 years. I swallowed. Accidents. Walter shook his head slowly. They all lived in that house. A cold feeling crept up my spine. What happened to them? Walter leaned closer. And whispered. They said something was calling them into the water. I didn't believe him. Least. I tried not to. But when I got home that evening, something had changed. The back door was open. I was certain I had locked it. A wet trail of footprints led from the lake. Across the grass. The steps. And into the house. I followed them slowly through the kitchen. Through the hallway. The stairs. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. The footprints stopped outside my bedroom door. Then disappeared. Like whatever made them had simply vanished. I stood there staring at the floor. Trying to breathe. Trying to think. Then I noticed something scratched into the wood of the door. 3 words. Carved deep into the paint. Still dripping water. Come to the water. And that's when I heard it again. Not outside. Not in the hallway. But inside my room. Slow. Breathing sound. Right behind the door. Part 2, the hidden path. I didn't open the door. For almost a full minute, I just stood there in the hallway, staring at the wood while that wet breathing continued on the other side. Low. Uneven. Like lungs struggling to pull in air. My hand hovered inches from the doorknob. Every instinct told me something was wrong. Very wrong. But curiosity and fear have a strange relationship. Sometimes fear pushes you to run. Sometimes it pushes you to look. I swallowed and forced my hand onto the knob. The metal felt cold. Too cold. I slowly turned it. The breathing stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound itself. I pushed the door open. The bedroom was empty. No one inside. No wet footprints. No open windows. Nothing. Just the pale evening light leaking through the curtains and the distant sound of the lake behind the house. For a moment I actually laughed under my breath. A nervous laugh. You're losing it, I whispered to myself. But then I noticed something on the floor. Water. A small puddle near the center of the room. And in the middle of the puddle sat something that absolutely had not been there before. A small smooth stone. Dark. Shiny. Lake stone. I slowly crouched beside it. The stone was still wet, dripping, like it had just been taken from the water. I stared at it for several seconds before standing again. Something had been inside my room. Something had brought that stone with it. And I hadn't heard it leave. That night I didn't sleep. I kept the bedroom light on and sat in a chair facing the door. Around 2 a.m. I started hearing something outside again. But it wasn't knocking this time. Sounded like dragging. Like something heavy being pulled slowly across the ground near the lake. Crepe. Crepe. I moved to the window carefully and looked out. At first I couldn't see anything. Then the moonlight broke through the clouds. And I saw movement near the water. Something was being dragged across the shore. Long shape. Too big to be an animal. Too slow to be a person. My chest tightened. Then the shape suddenly disappeared into the reeds near the lake. And everything went quiet again. The next morning I decided I needed to investigate. Not the house. The lake. Walter's warning kept replaying in my mind. They said something was calling them into the water. I grabbed a flashlight and walked down toward the shore. The morning fog was thick that day. The lake looked darker than before. Almost black. As I stepped closer to the shoreline, I noticed something strange in the grass. Trail. Not footprints. More like a path where the grass had been flattened repeatedly, leading away from the shore. But not toward the house. It led into the woods. I frowned. I had walked around the property several times already and never noticed any path. But there it was. A narrow trail cutting through the trees like something had been walking there for years. My curiosity won again. Followed it. The forest swallowed the sound of the lake behind me. Branches cracked under my shoes as I walked deeper into the trees. The path twisted between tall trunks and hanging vines. And the deeper I went, the colder the air became. After about 5 minutes of walking, I saw something that made me stop. A wooden sign nailed to a tree. Rotting. Half covered in moss. 3 words were carved into the wood. Turn back now. I stared at it for a moment. Then I noticed something else carved beneath it. Dozens of small scratch marks. Like someone had tried to erase the warning. Or add something underneath. But the wood was too damaged to read clearly. Chill ran through me. I looked back toward the direction of the house. I couldn't see it anymore. The woods had swallowed it completely. For a moment I considered turning around. But then I heard something ahead. Water. Dripping. Slow and steady. Rip. 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 Followed the sound. The path opened into a small clearing. And what I saw there made my stomach drop. Another body of water. A smaller pond hidden deep in the woods. The surface was completely still. Too still. A glass. I slowly stepped closer. And that's when I noticed something floating near the center. Old clothes. A shirt. Pair of jeans. Half submerged in the water. Like someone had taken them off and walked in. A horrible thought crossed my mind. Walter said 3 people drowned. What if this was where they entered the water? Then something moved beneath the surface. Not a fish. Too large. The water rippled slowly outward. Froze. Something beneath the pond was moving. Circling. Watching. Then the surface became still again. And I suddenly felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. Not at all. I turned and hurried back down the path toward the house. But halfway there I noticed something new. Footprints. Fresh ones. Wet. Leading toward the pond. But not from the lake. From my house. My breathing became shallow. Someone had left the house this morning. Walked through the woods. And gone into the pond. And I lived there alone. That night the lake was louder than ever. Wind slammed waves against the rocks behind the house. And sometime around midnight, I heard movement in the kitchen. Cabinets opening. Slowly. Creaking. I grabbed the flashlight and crept downstairs. The kitchen light was off. But the moonlight coming through the window revealed something horrifying. All the cabinets were open. Every single one. And on the floor, there were dozens of lake stones. Perfectly arranged in a circle. In the center of the circle sat something else. Piece of paper. soaked in water. My hands shook as I picked it up. 3 words were written in shaky handwriting, not scratched like the message on the door. Written with ink. And I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was mine. The message read, "You promised you'd come back." My heart started racing. I knew I had never written that. Never. But the handwriting was unmistakable. It was mine. That's when I heard the back door open. Slowly. Creaking. Cold wind rushed into the house. And from outside, from the direction of the lake, a voice whispered through the darkness. Broken. And very wet. "Why did you leave me?" I slowly turned toward the open door. And in the moonlight, I saw someone standing at the edge of the water. Someone I recognized. Someone who absolutely should not have been there. Because according to the police report, he had drowned in that lake 7 years ago. And the worst part, he was staring directly at me, smiling, with water slowly pouring from his mouth. Part 3, the lake knows my name. The man standing at the edge of the lake shouldn't have existed. I knew that, because 7 years ago, the police had dragged his body out of that same water. His name was Ethan, my brother, and I watched him die. But the figure standing there in the moonlight looked exactly like him. Same height, same broad shoulders, same crooked smile he always had. Except now, something was terribly wrong. His skin looked pale, almost gray, like clay soaked in water. And his clothes were dripping, not just wet, dripping like he had been standing underwater for hours. The lake behind him was completely still, but water kept pouring from his sleeves and the bottom of his shirt, like the lake refused to let him go. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. My mind was screaming that it wasn't real, that it couldn't be real, but my eyes refused to look away. "Ethan," I whispered. The figure slowly tilted its head, the same way the shape had done the night before. Then it spoke, or at least, something inside it tried to. Its voice sounded like someone talking through water. Gurgling. Broken. "You left me." My heart slammed against my ribs. "No." The words came out weak. "I didn't." The figure slowly took 1 step forward from the lake. Water splashed softly around its feet. "You promised." Its mouth stretched wider than a normal smile should. Water spilled from between its teeth. "You said you'd come back." My body refused to move. My brain kept trying to reject what I was seeing. Because Ethan had drowned when we were kids. And that night, ran. I didn't help him. I didn't even try. The figure suddenly stopped moving. Then its head snapped toward the woods, like it had heard something. For a few seconds it stood perfectly still, listening. Then it slowly looked back at me, and whispered one last sentence. "She knows you're here." Before I could ask what he meant, the figure simply collapsed into the water. Not like someone falling. More like its body had melted back into the lake. The surface rippled once. Then everything went still again. I stood there shaking for several minutes before forcing myself to close the back door. That night I didn't sleep. Not even for a second. The next morning I drove straight back into town. I needed answers. Walter was already inside the convenience store when I arrived. The moment he saw my face he sighed. "You saw someone at the lake, didn't you?" I didn't even bother denying it. "How did you know?" Walter slowly wiped his hands on a rag. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "Everyone who lives in that house sees someone eventually. Someone they lost." My throat tightened. "You mean a ghost?" Walter shook his head slowly. "No. What then?" He looked toward the window of the store, where the distant tree line surrounded the lake area. His voice dropped to a whisper. "The lake shows you who it needs." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" Walter hesitated. Then he leaned closer. "That lake has been there longer than this town. Longer than the houses. Longer than the roads." He frowned. "So?" Walter's eyes looked darker suddenly. "Things used to drown there before people even lived here." Cold chill ran down my spine. What kind of things? Walter didn't answer. Instead he asked a question. Did it speak to you? My silence was enough. Walter nodded slowly. It always starts with voices. That afternoon I returned home. And something immediately felt wrong. The air around the house smelled different. Wet. Heavy. Like the scent of the lake had spread across the entire property. When I stepped inside, the temperature felt colder than usual. But that wasn't the worst part. The stones from the kitchen circle were gone. Every single one. I slowly walked through the house checking each room. Nothing seemed disturbed. Until I reached the back porch. The door was slightly open again. And on the wooden boards outside, someone had arranged the stones again. But this time they weren't in a circle. They formed a path. A narrow line of stones stretching across the grass, leading directly toward the lake. My heart began racing. I didn't want to follow them. But something deep in my chest, some horrible curiosity, pulled me forward, step by step, stone by stone, until I reached the water. The lake looked darker than usual, almost black, and the wind had completely stopped. The entire world felt silent. Then something moved in the reflection on the water. First I thought it was just my shadow, but then I realized something horrifying. The reflection wasn't copying my movements. It was moving on its own. My reflection slowly lifted its head, even though I hadn't moved. Then it smiled, wide, a natural smile, and whispered my name, right from the surface of the water. Daniel! My blood ran cold. I stumbled backward away from the lake. The reflection vanished instantly. But the water began to ripple. Something beneath the surface was moving again, circling, low, patient, like a predator. That night things became worse, much worse. Around 1 a.m. I heard something fall in the living room. Loud crash. I grabbed the flashlight and hurried downstairs. Picture frame had fallen off the wall. One I hadn't even noticed before. An old photograph. Picked it up carefully. The picture showed 3 people standing near the lake. Man, woman, and a teenage boy. At first I thought it was just some old family photo from previous owners. Then I looked closer. The boy in the picture looked exactly like me. Same face, same eyes, same scar above my eyebrow. My hands started shaking. But the date printed on the photograph made it even worse. 1986. I wasn't born until 1997, which meant one thing. Someone who looked exactly like me had been standing by that lake 11 years before I existed. Then I heard the whisper again, right behind me. What? You came back. I spun around. No one was there. But the whisper continued. From somewhere in the house. From somewhere deep in the walls. You always come back. My chest tightened. What are you? Shouted. The house went silent. Then a different voice answered. A woman's voice. Low, ancient, echoing like it came from deep underwater. You belong to the water. The floorboards creaked behind me. Slow footsteps moving toward the back door. I turned just in time to see the door slowly opening by itself. Outside, the lake glowed faintly under the moon. And standing near the shore was Ethan again. But he wasn't alone this time. Something tall and thin stood behind him in the water. Something far too large to be human. And as the moonlight shifted, I saw its face beneath the surface. A face made of dozens of drowned faces. All staring at me. All whispering the same words. Come back. Part 4. The night the lake took someone else. I didn't sleep that night. Not after seeing the thing in the water. Not after hearing those voices. And definitely not after seeing Ethan standing there again. But the part that stayed in my head the most was the thing behind him. That tall shape beneath the surface. The one made of faces. I kept trying to convince myself it had been a trick of the light. A reflection. Shadow. But deep down I knew what I saw. Something lives in that lake. And it isn't alone. By morning my head felt heavy, like I hadn't slept for days. I needed someone else to see what was happening. Someone who could tell me I wasn't losing my mind. So I called the only person I trusted. My friend Mark. We had known each other since college. Mark was the kind of guy who never believed in anything supernatural. Ghosts, curses, monsters. He thought all of it was nonsense. Which was exactly why I needed him there. If Mark saw something, then it meant it was real. He arrived that afternoon in his old pickup truck. The moment he stepped out, he looked around the property. "Man," he said, "you really moved into the middle of nowhere." I forced a weak smile. "You have no idea." Inside the house I told him everything. The knocking, the wet footprints, the hidden path, the figure in the lake, Ethan, the reflection that spoke my name, the thing beneath the water. Mark listened quietly the whole time. When I finished, he leaned back in the chair and rubbed his face. "Okay," he said slowly. "So either you're messing with me," he paused, "or you're having a full mental breakdown." I expected that answer. "I knew you'd say that." Mark shrugged. "Look man, you're going through a lot. Divorce, moving out here alone. Your brain is probably just playing tricks on you." Then he stood up. "But we can still check the lake if it helps you calm down." We walked outside just before sunset. The sky had turned dark orange behind the trees. The lake looked quiet again. Too quiet. Mark crossed his arms as he stared at the water. "This is the scary lake." He nodded. He stepped closer to the shore, picked up a rock, and tossed it into the water. Left. Ripples spread across the surface. "Looks normal to me," he said. I didn't answer, 'cause something felt wrong. The air had suddenly become colder. The wind had stopped. And the ripples from the rock weren't fading. They were getting bigger. Mark frowned. "That's weird." The ripples continued expanding across the lake. Then the water bulged upward slightly, like something huge was pushing up from beneath. Mark stepped back. "Okay, that's actually weird." The surface suddenly flattened again. Silent. Like nothing had happened. Mark exhaled slowly. Probably a big fish or something. But his voice sounded less confident now. That night we stayed inside. Mark insisted we keep all the lights on. Around midnight we heard the first sound. A soft tap against the back window. Mark froze. "You hear that?" I nodded slowly. Another tap. Then another. Mark walked toward the window, pulled the curtain back. His face changed instantly. "What the hell?" "What?" he asked. He pointed toward the lake. I stepped beside him, and my stomach dropped. There were people standing in the water. At least 5 of them. All motionless. All staring toward the house. Their bodies were half submerged. Their clothes hanging heavy and wet. One of them slowly lifted its head. Moonlight revealed the face. It was Ethan again. Mark stepped away from the window quickly. Okay, that's not normal." His voice was shaking now. "What are they doing?" Before I could answer, all 5 figures began walking toward the shore. Slowly, step by step. Water dripping from their bodies. Mark grabbed my arm. "We need to leave. Now." But before we could move, the back door slammed open. The cold night air rushed inside. And something else came with it. The smell of lake water. Rotting. Heavy. Mark whispered. "Did you leave that unlocked?" "No." The footsteps began. Wet footsteps. Moving across the wooden porch. Then into the house. Rip. Up. Rip. Up. Mark grabbed a kitchen knife. "What the hell is happening here?" The footsteps stopped right outside the kitchen. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. Then we heard a whisper. Right outside the door. "Daniel!" My heart nearly stopped. It was Ethan's voice again. But deeper now. Like multiple voices speaking at once. Mark whispered. "You know that guy?" "No." The whisper came again. Closer. "You left me in the water." Mark's grip tightened on the knife. "We're leaving." We slowly backed toward the front door. The whisper suddenly turned into laughter. What? Gurgling laughter. And then something slammed against the kitchen door from the other side. Hard. Mark shouted, "Run!" We burst out the front door and ran toward his truck. Behind us the house lights began flickering violently. Doors slamming. Windows shaking. Like something inside the house was furious. Mark jumped into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. But before he could shift into drive, he froze. What the hell? I followed his gaze toward the lake. Dozens of figures now stood in the water. Not 5, not 10. Dozens. All silent. All watching the house. Mark whispered, "That's impossible." Then something moved behind them. The surface of the lake slowly rose. Like something enormous was standing up beneath it. The water split open. And that thing I saw the night before began rising again. The tall shape made of drowning faces. Its body formed entirely from pale hands and hollow eyes. All staring toward us. All whispering. And suddenly every voice said the same sentence. "Bring him back." Mark slammed the truck into reverse. Nope. The truck sped down the dirt road. The lake disappeared behind the trees. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Finally Mark exhaled. What the hell was that thing? I didn't answer. Because something even worse had just happened. Mark's truck radio suddenly turned on by itself. Static filled the speakers. Then a voice whispered through the radio. "What? Broken." Right next to Mark's ear. "Where are you taking him?" Mark slammed the radio off. His hands were shaking now. We reached the main road. He pulled over and looked at me. "I'm staying at a motel tonight," he said. "You should come with me." But something about the lake pulled at my mind. Horrible feeling. Like something unfinished. I need to go back," I said quietly. Mark stared at me like I was insane. "Did you not see that thing?" "I know, but I think it wants me." Mark shook his head. "That's the dumbest thing you've ever said." Then he sighed. "Fine. I'll go with you." And that decision was the worst mistake he ever made. When we returned to the house an hour later, everything looked normal again. Too normal. The lights were off. The lake was silent. No figures in the water. Mark exhaled. "See. Probably just some weird." He stopped. Because something was carved into the front door. Fresh scratches. Deep in the wood. For words. "You brought another one," Mark whispered. "That wasn't there earlier." Before either of us could react, we heard something behind the house. Flash. Then another. Mark grabbed the flashlight. Part 5. The water keeps what it takes. I stood there for a long time after the lake swallowed Mark. I don't know exactly how long. Minutes. Maybe an hour. The water had already gone completely still again, like nothing had happened. Like the lake had simply closed its mouth after feeding. Mark was gone. No splashing. No movement. No bubbles. Just black water reflecting the moon. My legs felt weak. I slowly stepped closer to the shoreline. "Mark!" called out. My voice sounded small against the trees. No answer. The water didn't move. I grabbed a long branch from the ground and pushed it into the lake, trying to feel for something beneath the surface. The stick disappeared into the dark water. But I couldn't feel the bottom. The lake was deeper than it looked. Far deeper. Then something brushed against the stick. Froze. For a second I thought it was Mark. But whatever touched the branch felt wrong. Cold. And it moved like fingers sliding along the wood. I dropped the branch instantly. The water rippled once. Then went still again. A whisper drifted across the surface. Satisfied. One more. I backed away from the lake slowly. My heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The thing in the water had taken Mark. Just like it took Ethan years ago. And I knew something else now. It wasn't done. I didn't go inside the house right away. The thought of being alone in there felt worse than standing outside in the cold night. Instead I sat on the porch steps staring at the lake. Trying to understand what was happening. Trying to remember something I had pushed away for years. The night Ethan drowned. The memory had always been blurry. broken pieces, cold water, his hand slipping from mine, my legs running toward the woods. But something about the lake tonight was pulling that memory closer, like it wanted me to remember. I covered my face with my hands. And that's when I heard the voice again. Behind me. What? Daniel. I slowly turned around. Ethan stood in the yard, just a few feet away. But this time he looked worse than before. His skin was cracked. Water dripped from his hair. And his eyes looked hollow, like something inside him had already rotted away. "Why did you run?" he asked. My chest tightened. I was scared. Ethan tilted his head. "You promised you'd help me." The memory hit me harder now. That night, 7 years ago, we were swimming in the lake. Ethan went out too far. He started struggling. I tried to help him, but he grabbed me in panic, pulled me under. Water filled my nose and throat. I thought we were both going to drown, so I pushed him away and swam to shore. Then I ran. I didn't even look back. By the time people came to search, Ethan was gone. I forced myself to meet his hollow eyes. "I didn't mean to leave you." Ethan's mouth slowly twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. "You didn't leave." My stomach tightened. "What?" His voice became deeper, more voices mixing into it. "You gave me to the water." The ground beneath my feet suddenly felt colder. Ethan slowly stepped closer. "You always belonged here." My mind started racing. "What are you talking about?" Ethan lifted his arm slowly, pointed toward the woods, toward the hidden path I had found earlier. "The water remembers." Then his body began dissolving again, melting into a puddle of dark water that soaked into the grass. But before he vanished completely, he whispered one final sentence. "You should see what you left behind." I didn't want to go back into the woods, but the words echoed inside my head over and over. The water remembers. And something inside me needed answers. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the hidden path again. The forest felt different at night. Darker. The trees blocked almost all the moonlight. Every branch looked like a reaching hand. Every shadow felt alive. The sign on the tree, "Turn back now," looked even older than before. And something new had been carved beneath it. Fresh scratches in the wood. 3 words. "Too late." My heart pounded harder as I continued down the trail. Soon I reached the hidden pond again. But tonight the water wasn't still. The surface was moving slowly, like something beneath it was breathing. The clothes were still floating near the center. But now there were more of them. Not just one set. Several. Shirts, shoes, jackets, all drifting in the dark water, like the pond was slowly collecting them. Then my flashlight beam caught something on the opposite side of the pond. A wooden post sticking out of the mud. Something was nailed to it. I walked closer. My stomach twisted when I saw what it was. Photographs, dozens of them. Old. All showing people standing near the lake. And every single photo had something scratched across it. A word. Taken. I scanned the pictures slowly. One face made my heart stop. Mark. A photo of Mark standing near the lake. But that picture had to be impossible, because I had taken that picture earlier today when he arrived. Yet here it was, printed, nailed to a wooden post. And across Mark's face the same word was carved. Taken. Then I noticed something else. At the very bottom of the post, a final photograph. My photograph. Picture of me standing in front of the house. Taken years ago. And the word across my face was different. Not taken. Not yet. Instead it said something much worse. Returned. The pond behind me suddenly bubbled violently. I slowly turned. Something large was rising beneath the surface again. But this time it wasn't the thing made of faces. It was a body, floating upward slowly. My heart nearly stopped, because the body rising toward the surface was Mark. His eyes were open, his skin pale, and his mouth slowly opened as water poured out. Then his head turned toward me, and he smiled, just like Ethan did. and whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." Part 6: The Ones Who Come Back. Mark's body floated in the pond like a puppet with its strings cut. For a moment I convinced myself he was still alive. People survive drowning sometimes. They get pulled out. They cough up water. They breathe again. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't what I was looking at. Because Mark wasn't floating naturally. He was rising, slowly, like something beneath him was lifting him upward. The dark water rolled off his jacket as his body reached the surface. His eyes were open, too wide, too still, and they were staring directly at me. I couldn't move. My flashlight beam shook violently in my hand. "Mark," I whispered. For several seconds nothing happened. Then his mouth opened. Water poured out in a thick stream, splashing back into the pond. His chest didn't move. He wasn't breathing. But somehow, he was still smiling. Then his body jerked, just once, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Mark." His head tilted slightly to the side. The same unnatural movement Ethan had made earlier. And when he spoke, it wasn't Mark's voice. It sounded like dozens of voices speaking through him. But broken, layered together. "You brought him back." I stumbled backward. "What are you?" Mark's body slowly stood up. Water poured off him as he climbed out of the pond. But he moved wrong. His legs bent at strange angles. His shoulders twitched, like something inside him was still learning how a body works. "You always bring them back," the voices said through Mark's mouth. I shook my head violently. "No, I didn't." Mark took another slow step toward me. His eyes rolled slightly in their sockets. "You fed the water once before." Cold fear crawled up my spine. "What?" His head twisted sharply. "You gave Ethan." The memory slammed into me again. That night. Cold lake water. His fingers grabbing my arm. Pulling me under. And me pushing him away to save myself. Mark's body pointed a stiff finger at me. "You promised the water." I didn't promise anything. But something deep inside me knew that wasn't entirely true. Because right before Ethan disappeared beneath the water, I screamed something. Something desperate. Something I barely remembered until now. "Take him instead." I had shouted it to the darkness. To the lake. To anything that might listen. Just so I could escape. And now the water remembered. Mark took another step closer. His feet left wet prints in the dirt. "The water always collects." My chest tightened. "What does it want from me?" Mark's smile widened unnaturally. "You." The ground beneath the pond suddenly shook. The water bubbled violently. Something massive was moving underneath again. I backed away slowly. Mark didn't chase me. He simply watched. His head twitching slightly. "You can't leave." I turned and ran back toward the path. Branches slapped against my arms as I pushed through the dark woods. Behind me I could hear footsteps. Not just Mark's. Or many more. Wet feet moving through leaves. Rip, up, rip, up. They were following me. By the time I reached the house I was gasping for breath. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. For several seconds the house was silent. Then the knocking started again. But not 3 knocks this time. Dozens. Hands pounding against the walls. Against the windows. Against the door. Wet palms slapping the wood. My heart raced as I backed away from the entrance. Then the whispering started. From every direction. From the walls. From the ceiling. From the floor. "You promised. You fed us. You belong here." Covered my ears. "Stop." The lights in the house flickered violently. The entire building creaked like something enormous was pressing against it. Then the back door slowly opened by itself again. The lake glowed faintly outside under the moon. And standing along the shoreline were dozens of figures. All the drowned. Ethan, Mark, and many others I had never seen before. Men, women, children, all soaked, all pale, all staring directly at the house. and behind them, the lake began rising again. The water bulged upward, splitting open as something enormous stood beneath the surface. The creature made of drowning faces slowly emerged again. But now I could see it clearly. It wasn't just faces. It was bodies. Hundreds of drowned bodies twisted together into one towering shape. Hands reaching outward, staring, mouths whispering, and every single voice spoke together. Bring him back to us. Mark stepped forward from the shoreline. His hollow eyes locked onto mine. You ran once. His mouth opened wider than it should. You won't run again. Then something happened inside the house. A loud crash upstairs. Glass shattering. I looked toward the staircase. My bedroom window had exploded inward. Cold wind rushed through the hallway. And water began dripping down the stairs. Rip, rip, rip. Like the lake itself had entered the house. The whisper returned again. Right behind my ear. You should have drowned that night. I spun around. But no one was there. Only wet footprints leading toward the back door. Toward the lake. Like something was inviting me. Calling me. Pulling me. The whisper became louder now. More desperate. More excited. Come back. Outside, the drowned figures slowly stepped into the water again. One by one. Ethan last. Mark beside him. They sank beneath the surface together. The massive creature of faces slowly lowered back into the lake. The water closed above it. And everything went silent. But just before the surface became still again, Mark's voice rose from the darkness. Me. You're next. Part 7, The Truth Beneath the Water. I didn't leave the house for the rest of the night. After the drowned figures disappeared back into the lake, the silence felt heavier than anything I had experienced before. No wind. No insects. No sound from the woods. Just the slow dripping of water from the broken window upstairs. I sat in the living room with every light on, staring at the back door. Waiting. 'Cause I knew something now. The lake wasn't finished with me. Not even close. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, exhaustion finally forced my eyes closed. But the moment I drifted into sleep, I was standing beside the lake again. The same place where Ethan drowned. The same moon. The same dark water. Except this time I wasn't alone. Someone stood beside me. Woman. Her back was turned to me, but I could see her reflection in the water. Long dark hair. Pale skin. Eyes that looked completely empty. You finally came back, she said. Her voice sounded ancient. Like it had traveled through centuries of water. Who are you? Asked. The woman slowly turned toward me. And the moment I saw her face, my stomach twisted. 'Cause she looked like me. Not exactly identical. But close enough that it felt like staring at a reflection from another lifetime. I'm the one who started this, she whispered. My chest tightened. What? She stepped closer to the lake. The water was empty once. Her reflection in the lake moved strangely. The water around her began darkening. But people feared what they couldn't control. What are you talking about? She knelt beside the lake and placed her hand on the surface. The water instantly bubbled. And suddenly images began forming beneath it. Old images, like memories trapped in the lake. Villagers standing beside the water. Torches in their hands. Angry faces. They needed something to blame, she said quietly. So they gave the water a keeper. The image changed. Now I saw the same woman tied to a wooden post near the lake. The villagers were chanting, praying, pushing her into the water. They said the lake needed a soul. My breathing became shallow. You're saying they drowned you? She nodded slowly. And when the water filled my lungs, something answered. The lake's surface suddenly turned black. Hands began rising from beneath it. Hundreds of pale hands reaching upward. The water was never empty. The images faded. The lake became still again. The woman stood and turned toward me. And now it always needs more. My throat tightened. What does that have to do with me? She stepped closer. And the moment her eyes met mine, I felt something cold slide through my chest. Because you belong to it. I woke up gasping on the living room floor. Morning light filled the house. For a moment I convinced myself it was just a nightmare. Until I noticed something on the coffee table. An old book. I was certain it hadn't been there before. The cover was worn leather, cracked with age. I slowly opened it. Inside were dozens of handwritten pages. Records. And every entry had the same note written beside it. Given to the water. My stomach twisted as I flipped through the pages. The names stretched across centuries. 1800s, 1700s, even older. Each person had drowned in the same lake. But one detail caught my attention. Every few decades, the same last name appeared again. My last name. My family. My hands started shaking. I turned to the final page. The most recent entry. 7 years ago. Ethan Carter. Given to the water. My chest tightened painfully. Below that entry, there was another name. One written in fresh ink. Mark Sullivan. Taken by the water. And beneath that, one final blank line. Waiting. Felt sick. Because the space beneath it had already been prepared. And next to that empty line, someone had written a message. Return the keeper. My head spun as I stared at the words. Then something else clicked in my mind. Walter. The old man in town. He had warned me about the lake. But he had also known too much. I grabbed my keys and drove into town immediately. Walter's store was empty when I arrived. The bell above the door rang softly as I stepped inside. Walter. Called out. No answer. Then I noticed something behind the counter. Another photograph. Old and faded. It showed Walter standing beside the lake decades ago. And next to him was my father. I felt a cold wave of realization crash through me. This wasn't an accident. My father had brought us here when we were kids. Every summer. Swimming in that lake. Teaching us to dive. Teaching us to trust the water. And the night Ethan drowned, my father wasn't surprised. He was quiet. Too quiet. Like he had expected it. The back door of the store creaked open. Walter stepped inside slowly. He looked at the photograph in my hand. Then sighed. You figured it out. My chest tightened. You knew. Walter nodded slowly. The lake needs a keeper. My hands clenched. And Ethan. Walter looked toward the floor. The water took the wrong one. Rage exploded inside me. So you brought me back here. Walter met my eyes. It called you. No. My voice shook. You planned it. Walter didn't deny it. Your family has been keeping the lake fed for generations. The words felt like knives in my chest. You're insane. Walter shook his head slowly. No. He stepped closer. The water chooses. And it chose you. The ground outside suddenly rumbled. Both of us turned toward the lake. Even from the town road we could see something happening. The water was rising. Swelling upward like something enormous was waking beneath it. Walter whispered softly. It's time. My stomach dropped. For what? Walter looked directly into my eyes. For you to come home. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Message. Unknown number. 3 words. We're waiting. And attached to the message was a photograph, taken just seconds ago, of me, standing inside Walter's store. But the reflection in the window behind me showed dozens of drowned faces staring back. Part 8. The Keeper of the Lake. The lake wasn't just a lake. That much I knew now. It was alive. Not in the way trees or animals are alive. It was sentient, patient, hungry, and it had been waiting for me. After Walter's warning, I didn't hesitate. Ran. Back toward the house. Toward the path. Toward the hidden pond in the woods. The wind had picked up. Cold, sharp, smelling of stagnant water and decay. Branches whipped against my face. Every step, the forest seemed alive, pushing me forward. It was like the lake was calling, dragging me closer, tugging at something deep inside me. My flashlight shook in my hand. The beam wavered. Then I saw them. Figures in the trees. Not just shadows. People. Drowned faces pressed against the trunks. Their eyes wide, mouths gaping. All whispering, "Return him." And in the center, Mark, Ethan, Walter. All floating in the puddled mud of the path, pale and silent. I couldn't look away. I tried to run faster, but my legs felt heavy. When I reached the pond, the water was already moving. Not ripples. Not waves. Something darker. Thick, almost viscous. Rose. Slowly. A massive shape forming beneath the surface. Hundreds of pale hands reached out. Dozens of faces formed a grinning tower above the water. Then it spoke. A voice like all the drowned combined. "You belong to us." I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the night. Before I could turn, Walter's ghostly figure stepped out of the forest. He smiled. "You see now," he said, voice wet and echoing. "This is your legacy. Your family has fed it for centuries. And now, it chooses you." "What?" "Well, not. I won't." His hand touched my shoulder. Ice burned through my skin. "You cannot refuse. The lake remembers. The lake collects. You are the keeper now." Then I understood. All those times I swam there as a child. The lessons, the trust, the fear. It wasn't training. It was preparation. Every drowned face I'd seen. Every message. Every shadow. Every voice. It was all to bring me here. To the lake. To my fate. I stumbled backward. The pond churned violently. The drowned figures reached for me, rising from the water. Ethan's hollow eyes locked on mine. "Welcome home," he whispered. The water surged. It rose above my knees, then my waist. Cold, crushing, pulling. I tried to fight, but my arms were heavy. My legs wouldn't move. The water was inside my chest now, cold and alive. It whispered secrets. The lake doesn't just take. Gives. Gives a new body. New voice. A new will. And I felt it. Something inside me shifting. Changing. Becoming part of the lake. The last thing I saw before the water closed over my head. The house. The forest. The world above. All gone. Below me, the drowned faces. Mark, Ethan, Walter waiting. Me. Moo. Keeper. The lake whispered my name one last time. Forever. And I understood. I wasn't the survivor. I was the next. And the lake would never let me go. And now, every night when you see the water shimmer in the moonlight, remember. Someone is watching from beneath, waiting for the next promise to be broken.